Hello, good morning, everyone. In this meeting, we're going to talk about things to understand the nature and also elements of literature. Last week, we had talked about the definition of literature. And this week, we are going to try to find the importance of understanding the nature and also elements of literature. Do you have any idea? Okay, let's think about for 1 minute. All right. Do you know that the reason why you need to know the nature and the elements of literature is that because when you already understand the nature and its common elements, if they are to competently read or write a piece of literature, because understanding the various elements is particularly useful when studying longer works. It enables you to examine specific aspects of the work in isolation before piecing the separate aspects back together to display an understanding of the work as a whole. And when we talk about the nature of literature, what is actually the nature of literature? When we talk about the nature of literature, we can start from the definition of literature, the traits of literature, the characteristics of literature. Talking about the characteristics of literature, we can try to define literature as an expression of human feelings and then thoughts and ideas whose medium is language. It can be oral or maybe in written form. It is not only about human ideas actually, or even thoughts, or maybe the author's feelings, but also about experiences of the authors. And literature can be a medium for humans to communicate what they feel, think, and experience to the readers. Actually, we had already discussed these things last week, but I'm going to try to review it a little bit. Here, literature can also act as art and then language, aesthetic, fictional, expressive, and effective. After we have tried to analyze the nature and then the characteristics of literature, we need to move to analyze the function of literature. As you can see on screen, there are more or less 8 or more than 8 functions of literature. But in this opportunity, I'm going to discuss only 8 functions. First thing first, we are going to see literature as art that can entertain its readers, or maybe its audience, for example, if it is in the form of a drama or a play. As social and political function, literature can be used as a way or as a tool to, ask people to do something politically, like encourage people to vote for one of the candidates, for example, or follow the ideology from one leader, or maybe follow the ideology from one president, let's say. Using literature work, using short story, using novels, literature can also be used to spread good moral or good message to its reader. From linguistics function, literature work can be used as a way to pass down the language, or maybe in order to introduce new language, or even maybe a local language. And from the story, we can also find some cultural or maybe tradition or maybe religious practices that are illustrated by the authors. From educational purpose, literature can be used, for example, in a class as a way to teach English as the second language. For example, teacher can use the sentences and then ask students to analyze the sentences, analyze the part of speech, for example, or find difficult words so that they can get more knowledge or maybe get more understanding in the use of language, in understanding the language as their second language. In historical purpose, for example, if an author tries to describe historical event or historical events in his novel, we can also find historical facts. Or maybe one author can illustrate a real historical events, maybe that is packaged or mixed with fictions in his or her novel. More or less, we have 8 functions of literature that we can find in our daily life. Maybe you can find the other functions of literature. So if you can find the other functions of literature, you can share the functions in the comment sections or maybe in our WhatsApp group. All right, let's move to the elements of literature. As you can see on screen, there are 7 elements of literature, more or less, but in this opportunity, I'm going to try to analyze only the plot, setting, character, and also point of view. Elements of literature are presented in every literary text by their authors, and they are the essential ingredients that are required to create any piece of literature, including poems, plays, or novels, short stories, featured articles, nonfiction books, and so on and so forth. And literature works have these following elements: author, plot, setting, character, point of view, theme, and also tone. Yeah, depending on the nature of the story, characters are most often people or maybe animals, but you can also find a being or fantastical creature, or maybe a thing in a story, or inanimate object. Yeah, character is one of the most important aspects in a story. They are the who of a story, and writers use characters to perform the actions and speak dialogue, moving the story along a plot line. And a story can have only one character. Do you know that? Yeah, it can be a protagonist. And the story can be a complete story. Like in maybe one of the most famous story that has only one character, can be in one short story Or if you have ever read one novel, The Old Man and the Sea, it mostly talks about the life of one character. Yeah, some characters can be dynamic and will change over the story and over the course of a story, while other characters, they mostly static and they do not grow or change as a result of the action in the story. There are many different types of characters that you can find in literature works, and each character serves a different function. In general, we have two types of character. The first one is protagonist, and the second one is antagonist. The protagonist is the story's main character, and the story's plot centers around these characters, and they're usually sympathetic and likable to the reader. Yeah, mostly, and they are most often quote unquote the hero of the story. And on the other hand, antagonist is the bad guy, mostly the bad girl, or maybe the bad creature. Most of the action of the plot is born of the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist. We also have a character that is called as a flat character. Flat characters are two-dimensional characters that lacks depth or a real personality. Usually only has one or two characters, or maybe two characteristics and traits. And the role of a flat character is only to help the main character in pursuing his or her ambitions or goal, or maybe to reach his or her goal. And this character often plays a supporting role in the story, or in a play, or even in a novel. Even though they're not very prominent characters, and sometimes unimportant because they try to bring harmony, peace, and sometimes they try to create the comedy of the story. Writers usually try to use flat characters to create a specific atmosphere in the complex narrative structure. If we have flat character, there is also one type of character that is totally different from flat character. It is called as round character. Unlike flat characters, round characters are more complex and drawn in more detail by the writer. And usually, this character is being described in comprehensive physical detail, and readers will gain an insight into the character's interior life. For example, their hopes, their fears, their dreams, maybe their desire, and so on and so forth. If I can say, the example of famous round character in literature includes Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby. If you have ever read the novel or maybe watched the movie, the novel was written by Scott Fitzgerald. And if you try to analyze the character of Jay Gatsby, you will find that this character may gain an insight into his hope, his dream and desire towards the society and also his life. After we have talked about the character, let's move to the setting. A story setting refers not only to the physical location, but also the time and the action that takes place. It is the where, also the when of the story, setting of time and setting of place. In a short story, there are fewer settings as compared to a novel, because a novel can have various settings. The setting may also include the environment of the story, which can be made up of the physical location, it can be the climate, the weather, or even the social and cultural surroundings, or even the context of the society. The setting is a crucial part of a story's exposition and is often used to establish the mood of the story. A carefully crafted setting can be used to skillfully hint at the story's theme, and also to reveal some aspects of the various characters. Maybe if you want to analyze the characteristics or the traits of a character, you can also try to analyze the setting. For example, the trait of one character who lives in, for example, in tropical area will be different compared to a character that lives in, for example, in the mountainous region. Yeah. Setting can also explain the mood. For example, in one work from Charles Dickens, the quotation mentions that the river, reflecting the clear blue of the sky, glistened and sparkled as it flowed noiselessly on. So in analyzing this quotation, we can try to find the mood that is built by the author, or maybe the mood that is felt by the character. When we try to analyze the time period of the setting, we can try to find the exact or the detailed time when was the story written, or maybe the place, whether it's in the future, in the past, or in the present time, and also related to the time period that affect the language or the atmosphere or maybe the social circumstances in the story. The next element is point of view. So in literature, point of view refers to the perspective. So through which point of view you have the experience, or maybe you have experienced the events of the story. More or less, there are three types of point of view: first, second, and third person point of view. In the first person point of view, or first person POV, narrator uses the pronouns I, me, and we, maybe my, us, and ours as the main character. And readers may experience the story throughout this person's eyes and only knows what he or she knows and also feels. If you have ever read a storybook or maybe children's book when you were a kid, and then the narrator or the author will ask you or will mention, for example, like this: if you want to save the princess, you need to go to page 13. Or if you want to defeat the dragon, you need to stay in this page and follow the next page. Right, this is the example of the second POV. The writer or the author will use pronounce you. The last POV is the third person point of view, while the pronouns that are used, for example, he, she, and also they. First type of third person POV is third person limited. And from this perspective, readers can see the events unfold from the point of view of one person in the story. As the name suggests, we are limited to seeing things from the perspective of the third person narrator and do not gain insight into the internal life of the other characters. In the third person omniscience, the great eye in the sky, or maybe the one that knows everything, the third person is like the God or like the eagle eye that knows everything about everyone. And from this point of view, nothing is off limits. And this allows the reader to peek behind every curtain and into every corner of the event that is going on as the narrative moves freely through time and space, or maybe jumping in and out of the character's head along the way, or maybe suddenly go back and make a flashback, and so on and so forth. The next element is conflict. Conflict happens when a character wants something, but he or she cannot get the thing, or maybe something else or another character tries to get in the way. In this case, conflict offers 5 types. We can start from man versus self. It is between the, for example, main character and himself or herself. And the second one is man versus man. It is between 2 characters or between 3 characters. And we also have man versus nature between 1 character. And also, for example, the destruction of the environment, for example, the flood or tsunami. And number 4 is man versus society. Can be between 1 character and the group of people, or maybe the society that fight against his dictatorship. Last one, we have man versus supernatural. Can be between a man, a character, and a magic. Blood. So I do believe that all of you is already familiar with blood, because blood refers to the story and also all things that are related to the story, things that happen in sequence in a story. As you can see that this graph or this picture shows the sequence of the events or the sequence of the story. Plot has the introduction, raising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Introduction can also be called as exposition, and it is the introduction of the story. Usually in this section or in this part, you can find the background of the story. For example, the name of the character, if there is any, the description of the characters, and then the description of the setting of time, the setting of place, and other necessary background information. And then when the character finds some difficulties, It means that the character has experienced the raising action and the conflict of the story that serves as a focus and driving force of most of the story's action can create the rising action. And usually, rising action begins at the end of the exposition or at the end of the introduction and forms most of the plot and begins with an inciting incident. After the introduction of the problem, or maybe the introduction of the central conflict, the action rises as the drama of the story unfolds the maybe series of causes and effects, and these events culminate in the story's dramatic high points. And generally, it is called as climax. So this is the most important part of a story. After the character or the characters can overcome the conflict, so things begin to slow down and work their way to the story's end. In the end, the final part of the plot arc can represent the closing of the conflict, and then everything will back to normal, or maybe create a new normality. And often this takes the form of significant change within the main character, for example, and also with another character. Yeah. If the plot refers to what happened in a story, the theme here is deal with something what these events mean. The theme is actually the big ideas that are explored in a work of literature. These are most often universal ideas that transcend the limits of culture, ethnicity, or language. The theme is the deeper meaning behind the events of the story. And importantly, the theme of a piece of writing or maybe a piece of literature is not to be confused with its subject. It is also important to note that while all works of literature have a theme, they never state that theme explicitly. Like author will not mention what is the theme of the story explicitly in the literature work. So to identify the theme, you should look out for the symbols and also the motifs of the characters. Mostly you can find the symbols and motifs that are repeatedly highlighted by the writer. And after you have found the symbol, you need to understand that symbols are when one thing is used to stand for another. For example, if you have found the meaning of the symbol, maybe you can make a conclusion or try to draw a golden thread that probably the theme of the story is about love, or maybe revenge, or justice, betrayal, jealousy, forgiveness. So it is based on your analysis on the literature work. Yeah, talking about speaker and character, since we're going to talk about speaker and also character in a short story and also in a poem. So I'm going to break down and try to highlight the differences between speaker and character. Just like fiction that has a narrator, poetry also has a speaker or someone who is the voice of the poem. Yeah, oftentimes the speaker is the poet, But other times, the speaker can take on the voice of a persona or maybe the voice of someone else, including animals and inanimate objects. And character is actually he or she or the character that lives in a story. And a story told by a narrator who is not a character in the story is a third-person narrative. So from this slide, let's try to understand and try to find the differences between speaker and character. The speaker usually be found in a poem, and it is the active voice or maybe a character behind a poem and speak directly to the reader or to the audience. It can be a voice behind the poem or maybe a character of a scene or even the poet that read the poem. So when you're reading the poem, you will usually imagine the story that read the poem. So this is called as the speaker. Yeah, that's my last slide. So this is the information about the nature and the elements of literature, and also a short information between the speaker and also the character. I hope that you can get fruitful information from this video. Thank you very much for watching and for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.